I want to welcome you to the CPO Keynote conversation this morning. My name is Japin Hollis, and I lead strategic sourcing and procurement at Aflac, the duck, for those of you that are familiar with us. And it's my pleasure to act as the facilitator for our discussion this morning. We've got just a great panel of folks, and I've had a great time getting to know them as we prepared for our discussion. We're going to try to keep it pretty informal and let you listen in to concerns and ideas and lessons learned from public sector and private sector procurement leaders. With me on the stage are those leaders, and let me quickly introduce them. We've got Rung, who's the administrator for the Office of Federal Procurement Policy in the White House Office of Management and Budget. We've got Eliseo Rojas, who's the Chief Procurement Officer at Interpublic Group, IPG. Jim Butler is the Chief Procurement Officer for the state of California. And Tim Meester is the Senior Director of Procurement and Sustainability at Best Buy. Please give a warm welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Tim, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay, and we'll just kind of get our juices flowing here. When we spoke, one of the things that you talked about was how your team has been working to better understand the impacts of Best Buy's procurement and then developing strategies for addressing what you find. Can you talk a little bit about how you've educated yourselves, what you've learned, and how that's led to a more comprehensive, sustainable purchasing program at Best Buy?
Absolutely. So Best Buy has got a fairly strong background in sustainability from our appliance and electronics e-waste recycling program and our Energy Star appliance program and so forth. So we've got a really strong foundation to build from. But who here is on a journey in sustainability? Hands? Okay. Yes. So a couple of years ago, we realized that we've got over $5 billion worth of purchasing power on our indirect side, our non-merchandise procurement activities. And we procure a lot of fuel, energy, materials, packaging, supplies, paper, different chemicals, and so forth to keep our company running. And we realize we've got a direct impact on the environment, and a very, very large impact when you look at the scale of some of the things we do. So about a couple of years ago, we decided to adopt a sustainability framework within our group. And traditionally, we had a really strong supplier diversity program, but that program focused on minority and women-owned businesses only. And so the first thing we did was we expanded that program to include LGBT, veterans, disabled businesses, and so forth, and really made it a true diversity program. And then we added in all the other sustainability elements of human rights and 4 pillars, if you will, of environmental work: materials, chemicals, fuel, and energy. So we've enlisted people within our procurement team. And to make it work, we made it a part of their goals. So across our 90 or so procurement folks, it's 20% of their incentives is to drive something in the area of sustainability as part of their role. And we developed a program that was very transactional. We developed a menu of things that they could focus on. And that there's your dinner and your appetizers, right? There are light things you can do, there are heavy things you can do. Ultimately, you have to have a whole meal in order to succeed. And what we found is that the team really rejected that notion.
So fancy that.
They weren't that hungry. But they rejected the point system. They didn't reject the principles of what we were trying to do, and they realized it was important that we adopt sustainability and all the social elements of sustainability as a framework that we could affect. But they wanted to do the things that they were most passionate about, not everything. And what we found is that if you align the activity, like human rights, for example, is something we had never even explored in our indirect procurement space. Now we're partnering with the ICC and looking for different ways that we can look at the services and the products that we procure. And we're starting by exposing human rights within our RFP process. So our suppliers start to understand the United Nations guiding principles, and then we're going to bid and make decisions based on their feedback that we get in the RFPs. And then ultimately we'll move to an auditing program and so forth so that we feel good about it. But the human rights folks that jumped on that team were so passionate about it that the momentum, they just took off, like they left everybody else in the dust. And we didn't
harness passion.
Yeah, it was aligning the activity to their passion of the individual, and that's where we got true results. So the nitpicky little point system that we created didn't really work, but it did expose opportunity to the group, and we got tremendous momentum.
Yeah, please, ask a question.
Sorry. Was human rights around human trafficking?
It was mostly around conflict minerals and fair labor practices. So, we're starting to explore the different services, especially our call center operations around the world, and understanding where there might be inherent risk based on the industry and the region that we're operating in. Human trafficking was, I don't know exactly if it's on their radar. I don't think it was one of the top priorities. We did launch 2 bids with conflict minerals in them last year. So starting to get transparency to our upstream supply chain. And that met with mixed reaction from our suppliers. Right?
Yeah, right.
Some knew a lot about it and they exposed everything to us. Some said, what's conflict minerals? So the education aspects of what we can do for our supplier community is huge also.
Did you look at, and have you partnered with anybody on that area? For example, one of the things that we've looked at AFLAC to do is partner with Made in a Free World, which works with the U.S. State Department actually, and others to help us look at slavery in the supply chain.
Yeah, I mean, we've partnered with the EICC because it's the electronics industry. So our vendors are engaged. HP has been a big partner of ours in that effort. So the more we can work together with our common supplier base, and the more we can learn from each other, the stronger we get. We have other organizations, BSR, SPLC. We learn a lot from a variety of places. Yeah.
They've done some work around human trafficking as well.
Yep.
BSR or who?
Yes.
BSR. Okay. Right. No, very good. Great. Kind of keeping with this theme of the journey, Anne, if I could ask you a question about how can category management efforts support social and environmental policies as you found in the administration?
So for those of you that aren't familiar with category management, we've taken the $450 billion that we spend each year in goods and services in the federal space and identified those that are common products and common services, which is about 2/3 or $270 billion. So we took out weapons systems and satellites and very mission-specific acquisitions. And we were left with sort of everyday common items. And we decided maybe it's time to start managing these items. So we've divided them into common categories, 10 common categories like professional services, IT, office management, and assigned a team, a category manager and a team to start managing this across government rather than in each of our 3,200 separate procurement silos around the globe. Spread out among 37,000 contracting officers. And part of the reason for doing this is we have very little visibility into our procurement space. We don't know how many contracts we have. We don't know what's in the contracts. We don't know really who we're buying from. One of our category managers just did a data analysis of their category and said, I'm not really sure of the number of suppliers because the data is so bad in terms of how you enter the company name. We could enter a company name 5 different ways. Right. So we're going to spend a good portion of our time just focused on data analytics, but there's no way that we can sort of monitor and ensure people are complying with all the good sort of social and environmental provisions that we have in our regulations if we don't have any visibility into these contracts. So category management, 1, is designed to give us transparency into the contracts that we have. To bring it down to a more granular level, what we're doing is we've developed a website, a portal with GSA, that houses all our existing government-wide contracts by category because our contracting officers didn't have this kind of visibility. Beyond that, we're starting to identify best-in-class contracts, which is going to be dependent on a series of criteria that we develop. And certainly, environmentally sound contracts will be one of the criteria by which we judge best-in-class. They will have to meet the environmental standards And so what we found in starting to dig through some of these contracts is some of them have the right clauses and some don't. So those that do will be part of the best in class. Those that don't will make sure that those provisions are in there. So it's not just transparency, but it's also driving behavior towards the best in class contracts. And then category management is also about managing your suppliers. So again, if you don't know who your suppliers are, you can't manage them. But once you have a better insight into who they are, you need to start working with those suppliers based on sort of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Industry does this very well. And your tier 1s, in theory, may be a team that you interact with more regularly because they're big dollar, or high risk, or important to the mission delivery of the federal government. And that's a team that you can start working with on things like greenhouse gas emissions or other social and economic objectives that you're trying to achieve in addition to performance and cost.
Thank you. Eliseo, I was fascinated when I talked with you because IPG is made up of 800 different marketing agencies around the world. And I don't know if those of you who are in
complex,
procurement,
yes.
Very complex. And you typically, marketers are kind of the polar opposites of procurement people, right? I don't know if you found that. They're like, whoo, way over here, right? Left brain, right brain.
Extroverts.
Yes, exactly. And so typically for procurement folks to get kind of control of marketing category spend, let alone get them to think about sustainability, and it just seemed like a bridge too far. But yet you have managed to work with them. Talk to us about your journey in working with 800 different global entities and getting them to purchase sustainably.
It's not easy, right? So first let me say that anybody who's in procurement understands that you are in sales, right? So you are selling internally, no matter what organization you're working for.
Great point.
Our perspective, because we are serving brands, clients, Fortune 1000 clients, and some of the government agencies, sort of the procurement organization in IPG straddles two worlds, right? One is how do you handle, manage, relate to the client-side procurement organizations who are trying to take away margins from your agencies. The second part of it is how do you get all of your agencies to understand that you are not the bad guy, now that you are here to help them run their business better. And you do that by understanding, A, what their challenges are, with the clients and in their marketplaces, and then trying to come up with solutions that will help them solve those problems. Then they start seeing you as someone who brings value to the organization as opposed to just focusing on, savings. So as it relates to sustainability, because all of these companies are under pressure from their client base to answer the question in every single RFP that comes through the organization about what are you doing in terms of sustainability, what are you doing in terms of diversity and inclusion and all those things. So now we become let's call the procurement organization because they have the answers that we need from the IPG perspective, not just the agency perspective, right? So it's a combination of things that we're able to do. Communicating with 800 different companies around the world is not an easy thing to do. So we rely on your typical newsletters that go out on a quarterly basis addressing key topics in the region or around the world. I just came back from Prague and Warsaw presenting at regional conferences for our financial and controllers folks, so 250 people that are in one room and you can address directly and talk about all of the things that are important to IPG from the sustainability and whatever else we're doing perspective. And that saves me 250 visits, right? So my teams are charged with the regions that they're managing. Part of their responsibility is you have to go out and you have to meet the people face to face. There's no better way to understand whether your message is getting through or not when you see someone's eyeballs, right, and their reaction to what you're trying to say. So we make a heavy investment in that, making sure that we get the message out directly to our agencies. And for the most part, they are very receptive because everything gets translated into, if you do this, because we're all on the same journey to improve our margins, you will be able to move the margins along. And for the last 10 years, the graph shows that, right? That since we started our procurement organization, the margins have been going this way. Now, we like to think that we've contributed to that progression, right, and that improvement. So I think that's what's made us successful. That's why I think the agencies know and understand that we are around, and they tap into our resources to be able to, in many cases, answer their clients.
Great, thank you. Jim, let me ask you a question. How do you see, in your journey, how do you see sustainability fitting into your typical priorities and mandates as a procurement leader in California?
Sure. Well, you know, in the public sector, we have advantages that the private sector doesn't and disadvantages. I used to run procurement at Dell Computer and at Levi. And by the way, the first time I met with marketing, they said, we want you to know that we think of procurement as sales prevention. That's what they told me. Like, wow, where's the love, you know? So by the time I got done there, we were doing the big agency deals with folks like your employer because we built that value. So I completely understand what you're talking about. But it used to be years ago that quality was a department. Like years and years ago, we had a quality department. And people figured out quality is everyone's job. We got rid of the quality department and we built quality in at every step of the process. I think that, you know, this category is on the same trajectory. For years, you know, the state of California has had a EPP, Environmentally Preferred Purchasing Program, maybe 15 or 20 years old. It used to be a sideline, but it can't be that way anymore. It's got to be part of what everyone does. It can't be a department. It's got to be part of what we do. The way that we think about sustainable purchasing is not only the technical part of the environmentally preferred purchasing stuff, because we have a big engineering group that's really good at greening our contracts, right? But we also have, I think, a world-class small business and disabled veteran business enterprise sourcing effort, and we hit our goals every year, especially for our disabled vets. You know, for years the state never hit their goals. We haven't missed for the last 5 years. So, you know, we've really shown a commitment to that. Well, all that has changed, and we've hit our goals because it's not just a department. It's not just a cubbyhole somewhere. It's part of everyone's job. Every solicitation that goes out has a set of terms and conditions that talks to some of the things you're talking about, sweat-free code of conduct, about, you know, no forced labor. We have, you know, goals, and bidders get an incentive to use a small business or to use a disabled veteran business enterprise. They get a preference and an incentive to do that. It's become part of everything that we do, and so I see us making, you know, a lot more progress that way because it's just, it can't be a category if I can make that point. It's got to just be part of what everyone does.
Great, thank you. So this question is kind of for all. I'm sure that as you have gone along your journeys in sustainability, you run into skeptics, right? Non-believers, people that may not believe in climate change, and certainly don't think that procurement ought to be out there espousing causes, right? How do you make the case in your organizations for incorporating sustainability into procurement, and that is good for business, and it may actually be you know, a business imperative or absolutely necessary? How do you go there? What do you do? What works? What doesn't work?
So it's easy for us because it comes all the way from the top.
Right.
So the CEO of IPG has made it very, very clear across the organization that there are certain things that we are committed to, and diversity and inclusion is one of them. And so supplier diversity is a very key component of that. He's made it very, very clear that sustainability is a key focus of the organization in response to clients' needs and requests. So this is no longer a nice thing to do, it's a business thing that we need to do to address a client's concerns. So we've become the first U.S. holding company to participate in the UN initiative to address some of the sustainability key principles. We've issued the first, GRI report. I'm not sure what the GRI stands for, but
Global Reporting Initiative.
Yeah.
But you did it.
But I did it, right? I did it. I did my portion of it, right? I was like, we need to do the GRI. Fine. Here are the results. So that message from the top makes it easier for you to go knock on doors and say, here's why we're doing it, and this is why you need to do X, Y, Z. I don't think that without that, it's an uphill battle.
Great point. Jim, you'd mentioned earlier about the support you're getting from the governor.
Yeah, we have, obviously from the top, Governor Brown's been a worldwide leader in this category. In the last year, he's signed agreements with several dozen countries to really take specific steps to limit climate change and greenhouse gas emissions. So we're lucky that we have it from the top, and I'd say most of the just the sentiment in California anyway is around sustainability. But we've also, there are skeptics, and so we've done work with Sacramento State University to come in and look at the economic impacts of sourcing through small businesses and disabled veteran business, because people complain, well, you're just paying more, it's just a social good program. So we actually had the economics department do the research, and they found that the economic multiplier behind local sourcing, which is by definition to be a small business, certified small business or disabled veteran business in our state, you've got to be local. There's like a 60% economic multiplier. Those dollars keep churning back to the economy. So it's not enough to just say, well, we're all going to do it no matter what. You also have to provide evidence as to why it's in everybody's best interest. And I think we all learned a long time ago, price is not the top reason why you buy anything. Right. It's maybe fourth or fifth down the list. Usually it was things like service levels, quality, responsiveness. Now it's brand equity, the brand risk, and others can talk to this, of making the wrong sourcing decision is very high on the list. But I also see sustainability as really moving toward the top of that list as well.
Great, thank you.
If I could add on
please,
to this too.
Please,
First, Eliseo, I know GRI is general rate increase. So, but at Best Buy, it's complicated, but it's not. Right? We tend to overcomplicate how hard it is to get people to think about doing the right thing in their purchasing decisions. Inherently, it needs to be a part of your DNA as a company because your customers will care. And when you can start getting progress on certain projects, actually, let me step back a moment. The people within the company want to do the right thing. Right? They want to invest in the best thing for the environment and the best thing for all social elements. We've got one of our distribution centers that's almost entirely, I want to say 85% differently abled associates. It's one of our most productive facilities. So the concepts work. The equation isn't an and or. It's not an or, finance or do the right thing. It's an and. Right, so we don't have the luxury of spending more to do these things, which forces us to be very creative about how we go about it. So we explored building our own solar field outside our California distribution center, and our CFO demanded payback within 2.5 years. Right, it's not even feasible.
Not going to happen.
But we're passionate about it, so we're looking at other avenues. We're looking at PPAs. We're looking at other financing options to get to where we want to be, because we believe it's the right thing to do for our company and for the environment and our communities. So I think you find that, especially as we're trying to attract millennials as customers, as we have millennials around our organization. Now, it's not just millennials that care either. You get this sense that, it's all about the millennials. They're the only ones that care about the environment. It's not. Like, I actually care, and I'm not a millennial, believe it or not.
What?
But
shocker.
Yeah, so people do care, and it inherently does have to become a part of your brand and who you are as a company, or you're going to start losing employees also. So it really becomes its own movement, and it's not actually that hard.
Can I answer that in the federal
Please.
space?
Yes, please.
So certainly when the President of the United States issues an executive order and makes a statement that agencies will begin to undertake certain practices in the environment or in labor. It's a powerful statement, right? And it happens because we have an incredibly professional workforce, but it's much more complex than that. And so before he issues an executive order, he has to undertake what's called an economy and efficiency argument. And a team of economists who work for the president have to do that research and issue that concurrent with the executive order. And so they have to point to studies or best practices at the state level or local level or in industry that shows that a company that undertakes some of these practices, like environmental compliance or sustainability practices or complies with labor laws, is a stronger performer and therefore will enhance the performance of the federal government and or cost savings. And even when that is issued and the president issues an executive order, there can still be, and there still is, some resistance. And it's not that anyone disputes the intent of the executive order, but they argue that you have to consider this executive order in its totality with other rules and regulations, and that it can be a somewhat complex space for federal contractors, right? And so there's a lot of rules and regs. And so some of our contractors will argue you need to consider that this is yet another sort of government-specific, government-unique requirement. And while well-intended, it can have an unintended consequence of driving down competition or keeping good companies out. So we're always trying to strike that balance and figure out ways that we can implement these best practices without it being overly burdensome to contractors and to the acquisition workforce, because there's a lot of rules and regs that they all have to follow. So examples are, an executive order could call for a pilot. So we could test something out to see how it works in certain agencies. So we did that with greenhouse gas emissions, where we asked the 7 largest spending agencies to consider greenhouse gas emissions in its source selection process. Or we could ask for a voluntary program. We created a government-wide scorecard for our top suppliers and asked them to voluntarily commit to providing us with information on their greenhouse gas reduction. And so we try to be creative and thoughtful about how we work through some of these executive orders when it comes to sort of directives that we're going to implement across $450 billion in spend across 3,200 procurement units around the globe. And we have to, with every executive order, issue a regulation that clearly spells out what that means at the practical level for the contracting officer. So if we say consider, greenhouse gas emissions, what does that mean to consider? How do you consider that? And if we're not crystal clear in every word of that regulation, we cause gridlock and confusion and sort of counter our efforts in this area. So it's not that I found there's no bad actors in this debate. Everybody has a very thoughtful viewpoint, and you really have to consider it all in its totality.
Great, thank you. I really have enjoyed the responses. The thought for me is that dealing with skeptics and making the business case, it all comes back to one, acknowledging that everybody has an interesting opinion, and it needs to be understood, because sometimes it's grounded in things that need to be addressed. But it's indisputable facts and logic that build your case, just like the economists that back up the president's decisions. That's powerful. Another question for all of you. Tell me a little bit about what your focus over the next 12 months will be in terms of sustainability, sustainable purchasing. Where are you looking to go? Maybe even your wish list. Where are you headed? What might even be a bridge too far? Well, I'd love to get there, but I can't right now. That's a farther. That kind of gives perspective to the audience as they take things back. Anybody?
For us, benchmarking, we're in the middle of a big benchmarking exercise where we finally have a financial system that will track purchasing statewide, and not just the purchasing data, but also the EPP data. So we built into it the ability for, if they use one of our contracts we've already greened, then we'll automatically get the data about carbon emissions reduction or water quality improvement.
From the supplier?
From the contract
the
database,
contract
because we load it in to start out with. So we do the tracking for them, which is really nice. So this year is going to be spent benchmarking, understanding where we are in terms of attainment. And the next year is really about setting goals and moving toward those. And we've never had those. And we've had a program for all these years. The legislature asked us, well, what are your goals? And we've never been able to answer that question because we didn't know what our performance was. But now that we can track that, that's where we're headed.
Again, back to data. No, very important. Good.
For the
Anybody else?
federal
Please.
government, we're partnered with the Council on Environmental Quality, which is also in the White House, and some of our agencies on implementing the pilot that I mentioned. So the 7 largest spending agencies will be selecting procurements for FY17 where they're going to incorporate greenhouse gas emissions into their source selection. We're also going to expand that scorecard that I mentioned. So we initially targeted the top dollar suppliers, asking for information as to whether they track greenhouse gas emissions and where. That's going to be expanded across all 500 billion. We just announced today, actually, a proposed rule around climate change, which specifically asks our contractors to state whether they have greenhouse gas emission reporting, whether they have targets, and if so, where that is, so we can have greater transparency into this space. And then through category management, you can expect our category managers to focus on finding ways to work with those suppliers on meeting some of our green goals.
Great. Wonderful.
Yeah, I think the category management piece is key because it really depends on what area you're talking about. So
Sure.
when you said, what are your priorities? I'm like, oh my God, we're just like going after everything. But it really depends on the category.
Great point.
In some areas, like the human rights elements, we're moving a little bit slower, right? So we're looking at a 3-year roadmap, a 3-year progression where we introduce the concepts to our suppliers, we gather feedback, and then we ultimately hold them accountable to that and make decisions about how we're awarding based on their feedback and their values as an organization. In other areas, we're going to test things quickly, right? There are no-brainer things, moving all of our corrugate to FSC certified or other certified corrugate, moving all of our paper to certified paper. Looking at our insert paper and how we source that. That's been a key focus of ours in partnering with stakeholders like the NGOs, like Greenpeace and so forth, to figure out how we can do it. And that's one thing I would mention is as NGOs can partner with us more, that becomes incredibly helpful because they've got a passion and an interest in doing the right things just as we do. So the more we can partner with NGOs to do that, the better. Through category management, you also find suppliers that know way more than we do about these things. So in our transportation space, we're looking for our carriers to help us with our alternative fuel strategies and where and when it makes sense and what pockets and in what modes of transportation it makes sense for us. Partnering with other organizations in our renewables plan, we've been working on that over the past few years, and it's difficult for us as a retailer with over 1,400 locations and all leased properties. Like, okay, how do you do your renewables? We're not going to put a solar panel on every rooftop because we can't. So what alternatives do we have? And our vendors, our suppliers have passion and interest just as we do. So we're really calling out to them to help us form those priorities.
Go ahead, Eliseo.
And, for us, earlier conversation, we talked about being a publicly traded company comes along risk in your supply chain that are reputational risk. So I think for us, the next 12 months to whatever number of years is to focus on those specific countries where we know are risky to do business with suppliers. Anti-corruption is one of the things that we really worry about all the time because it can have a significant impact, negative impact on your stock. And so we owe it to our shareholders and stakeholders to manage it tighter.
Thank you. Great responses. Tell me, as you think about that, as you plan for the future, what guides you in deciding which social and environmental and governance indicators you're going to focus on? What are the influences that impact you? And it's going to be different by sector, of course. Tim, you talked about NGOs. And one of the things I loved in one of our past conversations was just your comment was, look, I view them as a stakeholder. And I think that's a great viewpoint, right? I need to partner with them when I can. Sometimes they don't want to partner real well. But if you can, that becomes a great way, and they help guide and influence you. Suppliers, statutes. Give us a little bit of color about what guides you, what influences you, where do you take direction?
Incoming everywhere.
Incoming?
Yeah,
it comes
I mean,
everywhere.
For us, really, we go through a yearly process of aligning our objectives with the corporate objectives, right? And the way we do that is having the conversations with the business units as to what it is they're going to go after in 2017, for example. It'll start in July and August. So then we can shape a strategy that says, okay, we're going to support you because now we understand what you're going after, right? And the CEO comes down with, here's where IPG wants to go over the next year or so, and so we just align all our strategies to do that. Our compensation models are tied into the company achieving those goals. So it makes it easier.
We've got our Fab 5 that we track: water quality, air quality, toxicity, energy efficiency, and we talk about resource management. It's really recycling and reuse, right? But that's the kind of program, but we've got a couple of really major mandates that are driving everything. One is a law, AB 32 in California, which is about reducing CO2 emissions. And we've got some really aggressive goals to get to over the next few years. And there's specific targeted goals. And it's not just us, it's everybody. It's the buildings, people, it's all the industry in the state. We also have some executive orders like Ann was talking about. One of the interesting ones is related to electric vehicles, emission-free vehicles, right, ZEVs. So we've had a goal to get to 10% of the fleet by this year, which we've actually beaten a little bit. I think in the next 5 years we've got to get to 25% of the fleet. But these are coming to us from the governor, again, who's a leader. We got a new bill this year related to renewable diesel. For the first time, we never sourced that product. And it's got a very low carbon intensity, below 40. And so we put contracts in place for that too. So we kind of get it from everywhere, but there's a couple of really big pieces that are driving the agenda for us.
Yeah, and I should say that, look, every year the president issues a State of the Union. So it's very clear for us his direction and focus over the next year. He also has the president's management agenda that we set out several years ago that clearly states where we're focused in the management space. And then our team thinks about how can we support and drive that agenda. And sometimes there's a contracting piece when people hadn't considered that. So for example, if he says he wants to improve IT performance, we know that acquisitions is a fundamental part of fixing IT performance. But what I alluded to with incoming was sometimes there's congressional mandates. There are, legislation is passed that impacts our area, so we need to respond to that. Sometimes there are cyber breaches that will spur up a whole set of policy conversations and considerations around what can we be doing better in that space. Right. Do we have the right cyber clauses in our contracts? So we get input from a lot of different sources. I think we're a small team. We try to stay very focused as much as we can. So when I started 2 years ago, I set out I issued a memorandum just saying these are the 3 areas we're going to focus on: category management, vendor performance, and management, and innovation. And we've been really driving towards those 3 areas, but as I said, there are things like congressional mandates or cyber breaches that sort of veer us off into very thoughtful conversations and important ones, but ones we hadn't anticipated.
Thank you. Great points, Tim.
Yeah, I think it's on 2 fronts how we focus. What drives the most risk for us as an organization, and where can we have the greatest impact? The nice thing is we're an entrepreneurial organization, so if an individual wants to go after something, especially in our procurement group, we'll vet it as a leadership team, and then we'll allow them to do it. So we hit it on all fronts in all categories as much as we can. The heavy risk things we go after as an organization, beyond procurement, and how we look at that. So we've got a corporate sustainability team that's really strong. They're in our PR group. We look at those risks, as they come up or as we anticipate them, hopefully. Risk to disruption to our supply chain is critically important. So we look at diversification, and the diversification offers other opportunities for other diverse suppliers to come into our mix. But really it comes down to opportunity. So there are specific small projects and areas where we can have a dramatic impact. One of those, for example, this last year, we optimized our shipping cartons for our .com e-commerce orders. And we just changed the cartons to meet the size of our product a little bit better. It's 440 tons of corrugate that we didn't need. So little changes like that, and that has an impact on 1.3 million excess cubic feet of shipping, right? So it translates to fuel and other things. So just these little small changes for our company can have an enormous impact, and when you get 120,000 employees thinking about that, it's pretty powerful.
Great, thank you. Digging just a little deeper, as you take, how do you see sustainability helping the maturation process of your procurement organizations, particularly around category management, sourcing, supplier relationship management? I know at Aflac, one of the things that that I constantly battle is that my organization was established principally to be a sourcing organization. Save money, right? But we keep getting pulled into supplier relationship management, right? Monitor these suppliers for me. It's like I'm not staffed to go monitor all your suppliers. I monitor 5 critical ones, and that's it. How do you see sustainability kind of driving the change in your organization over time?
I think I'll take the first element of that. We do many bids and many contracts. Some 3 bids and a buy, some direct negotiation for large things, some very large scale bids. I would say that on 80% of them, we don't go deep enough into should cost analysis on what that product or service should be costing us ultimately. And the one thing sustainability and the social elements do for us is it exposes all the drivers of cost. So if we're asking for certain elements in the materials of the things that we're buying, if we're asking certain questions about the labor, we're going to get into those discussions, and our category managers and sourcing people are going to become way more educated about every element of that business, which also affords them the opportunity to educate our business clients internally about the cost drivers within their business. So I think it's the education just fuels our knowledge and makes us more sophisticated. And also the fact that we approach our clients with sustainability and diversity and human rights elements within their business, it's great for our image as a procurement organization too, because they may not even be thinking about these things. They may not know that there's an inherent risk there within their category. So the elements that we look upon ourselves as a procurement team within Best Buy is there are 3 elements of client engagement: being a trusted advisor, managing risk, and not just making sure we've got the appropriate insurance elements, but truly managing risk and understanding the vulnerability of that contract and that business, and then driving the business results. So those things work together very well with this space.
Great points, thank you.
Anybody else? Jim? Sure. I've often thought that my really good sourcing people are they're like hunters. They love to go out. It's all about the deal, right? They want to go cut the big deal. And they're really awful at what I would call gardening, which is just like, now you bagged them, develop it. Actually watch over it. Make sure no weeds grow,
This is a lefty environmental crowd, just like.
So, and I think they may even be different personality types. I've worked with this in all the organizations I've been in. Can I get my sourcing people to really pay attention to a contract once they get finished? And it's actually not that easy to do. But I love what Tim said, because I completely believe it. I mean, we have to get away from trying to wrench and wring every last penny out of our vendors on price, and really work from a supplier innovation perspective to find all the ways that we actually could take a lot of costs out of it if we just worked with them a little bit better. Right. We didn't ask for those 10 reports that no one ever looks at, but yet they cost them a lot of money to produce.
It's amazing. Everything you ask for has a cost.
It does. And so it's a big it's a shift in mindset, but I like your point, Japin, is that if we're already thinking about sustainability and trying to work with them on these deeper issues, it will also uncover a lot of new opportunities as well.
That's great. Anybody else?
Organizationally, in the federal space, we know we have to make some changes. Our contracting officers work very hard and have a large portfolio, but they have a quite diverse portfolio, and we've come to recognize that we need specialized teams. So we need to offer master's programs for some of our contracting officers in certain areas, because buying digital IT is very different than buying construction, right? And so we've created our specialized digital IT team with career officers and are sending them back to the agencies to provide hands-on support. In this area, it's going to be interesting to see at the end of this pilot, where we're considering greenhouse gas emissions and source selection, if we can tap into the expertise of that team that really figured out how to do this and put them out into the other agencies to provide support and expertise and really kind of train up a team specialized in this area. I also think your point about supplier relationship management falling on the shoulders of the contracting officers is a very important point. I think in companies that do this well, it's a separate team. And that's where we need to be in category management. I really see category management teams, I see contracting officers, and then I see a supplier relationship management team that could really focus on areas like this, as well as performance issues and driving down total costs. But that's a more mature state for us.
Great.
So for us, I think where we see the evolution of the procurement team is more into the how do we now take everything that we've learned and translate it into helping the organization monetize that, right? Revenue generation. And the ways we're doing that is going around and training our client-facing teams at the different brands and the different agencies on here's what you can expect from the client-side procurement organizations as you negotiate or pitch something. And here's where you can use and leverage what we've done across the organization as it relates to sustainability to become more of the preferred choice, right? And to become stickier to your current clients. And then secondly, looking at our supply base and say, where is the opportunity for us to introduce our agencies to those suppliers who need the services that we produce. So I think if we're able to do that, you'll be viewed in a very different light, right? Because now you're contributing to the top line of the organization. So that's a little bit different than your typical procurement group.
Absolutely.
And it's always more fun to sell than to buy, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And procurement people never get to sell. And all of a sudden, instead of them spending money, they're actually helping to bring in revenue. So it's actually just, it's cool for them.
That's a good thing, yeah.
Great points. Thank you. What?
Are you choked up?
I am totally choked up here. And tears running from my eyes. Talk to me a little bit about metrics. What type of sustainability metrics are you using to help you drive change? And what type of metrics do you wish you had, perhaps, that you don't? And what would it take to get them? Talk to me about metrics and how you're using that. We alluded to a little bit about benchmarking, spend data, things like that. But have you thought about specific sustainability metrics that you're going after?
I'll just say that not in the next year, but the 18, 24, 36-month goal for us is impacts. We really want to know what change have we made, because we could do all this and feel really good about ourselves, but at the end of the day, if you haven't actually had an impact, then it was just so many words. So we really want to get to that point. That was actually one of the things that drew us to SPLC, by the way, is we have had a lot of success with our buildings on the LEED program, and that was one of the things that was in the offing in becoming a founding member of SPLC, was to get to impacts, to get to measurements, to get to some kind of a rating system to help us know, are we making a difference?
Great. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think at a corporate level, we've got all the great metrics. We've got our CDP reporting. Our corporate sustainability group takes care of all of the higher level things. We've got a 45% carbon reduction goal by 2020, which is enormous. What we find, though, is that the metrics that really matter are on a project-by-project basis. So when you get really tangible about this project driving that benefit, and you can equate that to something for that team, and talk about the testimonial and the story that goes along with that, when we get a whole series of stories, we really start making progress. So we implemented a home delivery routing optimization tool for our appliance and electronics delivery, and it made us more efficient. It was a better experience for the customer, and by the way, it saved us 5 to 7 million miles a year, wow. Right? Because it was more efficient routes getting to the customer homes. It's the right thing to do on all fronts, and the storyline is fantastic. And as our business teams start making those storylines for us, when we're implementing things, then we start to see real progress.
In the federal space, I mean, we're more mature in some areas than others, and so we have a regulation that says 95% of new contracts for products and services have to require that products are, and then it's a list of like energy efficient, water efficient, environmentally preferable. And several years ago, my office began asking agencies to self-report as to whether or not they were complying and whether or not they were hitting the 95%, and if they weren't, putting together an action plan to remedy that. But I think, as powerful as starting to ask agencies to track and monitor are the sort of success stories and metrics at the more granular level, sort of more tangible level. And so when, for example, we awarded a contract for ground delivery services, air and ground domestically to UPS and FedEx, we, for the first time, considered the cost, the social carbon cost, right? So we asked them to tell us what their greenhouse gas costs were, and we factored that in with price and performance. And we asked then the vendors to provide us with regular reporting on how they're bringing those costs down. And so that kind of data is part of a powerful story in really trying to drive behavioral change across all the agencies. And in many ways, that kind of metrics and that kind of data is as powerful as saying, the vast majority of agencies are hitting the 95%, mandate,
wow.
Right?
Wow, powerful. Tell me, let's talk for a little bit about what's your greatest success story you've alluded to some of them. If you want to bring one back up and perhaps go a little deeper, that's great. And then talk to me about lessons learned. What didn't go quite well that really taught you some things?
I think for me, personally, when I look at where the organization was 10 years ago as it relates to diversity and inclusion and supplier diversity, it was non-existent. And today, we are one of the top-class, world-class programs in the United States, and we are the only holding company in this industry that is a leader in supply diversity and moving the needle in diversity and inclusion. So for me, that's a huge accomplishment. Yeah. It wasn't easy to do. A lot of lessons learned along the way, and primarily I think it was more about how do you get the entire organization excited about moving the needle in particular things. And in the beginning, we try the CEO said you should do this, so why aren't you doing that? And the learning lesson was, well, because these companies look at you as the parent company, and they wanted to know, well, what are you doing before you ask us what to do in this particular initiative? So we had to now create a reporting structure that says, and creates also a bit of competition amongst the different groups and the different companies to say at the corporate level, every manager now gets a report that says, here's how you're doing and your group is doing as it relates to the overall target.
Again, metrics.
And then at the agency level, it says agency 1 is here and agency 2 is here, and why are you guys not at the same, right? And that gets reported to the board of directors. And nothing drives attention to a particular issue than to bring it to the board of directors. So that was a lesson learned in the first year. And today it's part of the compensation package for all of the CEOs across the organization includes a target or accomplishments related to diversity, inclusion, and supplier diversity.
Great, thank you. Anybody else have success stories?
One of the favorite things I get to do every year, we have a big party at the end of the year, and we celebrate all the agencies who hit their small business goal and their disabled veteran contracting goal. We actually have a party, literally, and they get to come up with their agency secretary, and we give out these awards called the State Agency Recognition Awards. And we have a 25% small business goal, 3% disabled vets goal. The winners typically 35% disabled vet contracting, 80% small business contracting. They don't just like hit it a little bit; they like kill this goal. In the public space, we can't give them like a check or something like that. It's a gift of public funds. We can just recognize them, but that recognition is so meaningful. We get tremendous compliance, and that's as a son of a vet, as a father of a kid who's in the Air Force right now. The work that we do there makes a big difference to me, and we have these people coming back and saying, we love the program, it's giving us this opportunity to really make a difference, and they hire more people too, so it's very gratifying.
I think in the federal space, one of the sort of neatest events that I actually had no part in, so it's the success of my colleagues in the office and the Council of Environmental Quality, but they had the president convene a meeting in the White House with the CEOs of the top dollar federal contractors and announced that these companies would be committing to disclosing greenhouse gas emissions and making a commitment to this area in general. And at that meeting, 8 of the companies announced that they would begin for the first time tracking this and making it public. And the others just reaffirmed their commitment to this area. And then we saw, as a result of this, other companies shifting in this space. And what I liked about it was it was a more collaborative sort of atmosphere. It was more of a partnership approach rather than sort of thou shalt, a mandate from the executive office down. And it was about having a conversation, a civil conversation with our partners in the federal space. And so I thought it was a great example of being a little bit creative about how to drive change in this space.
Very inclusive. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say we've had a ton of tactical wins, small projects and things. We've had tactical kind of missteps to the point system I was talking about.
Right.
It wasn't successful. I'd say that the biggest, the thing I'm most proud of though is the cultural change within our organization. So, coming from procurement and everybody in procurement having a vested interest in doing great work that adds more value, more purpose to what they do every day is really powerful. Like they get to do something where they really feel like they're making a difference. They're not just cutting that deal or routing that contract for approval. They're actually engaged in something that's much bigger than that. And as you see the collective group doing that and that contagion kind of spreading out across the organization from us, it's very, very powerful. So I think the cultural thing is critically important. And we don't have executive mandates coming down from us, right? So it's.
Are you a federal contractor?
No, I'm not. But I did stay at Holiday Inn Express last night.
You guys can talk.
We're not for a reason.
I could use a couple of your economists though if you want to loan them out to me. But the tricky thing for us is investment and work on the sustainability front is often in competition with other investments that we're making for growth in our company. So there's a gradual shift where this is becoming important and an inherent part of the brand of the company, and I'm trying to push that even faster. But when you're investing in our stores and in our services group and technology to enable greater things, and that's going against investment in the solar field, like those things come up, and it's a fairly quick decision for our executives, growth or this. So the amount of effort that has to go into making these things inherently a part of what we need to do to grow our business, and the recognition that our customer base is interested in these elements as a part of our brand, that's the big challenge right now.
Thank you. Great points. Just to piggyback on some of the P words that we've used, sustainability is typically talked about in terms of people, planet, profit, right? But for me, one of the things that I've noticed that when you can tie words like passion and purpose into those as two other P words to use, all of a sudden people get really motivated about doing procurement work in a sustainable context or in a sustainable way. It really touches people's heartstrings, like we saw yesterday with the impact sourcing presentation. Martha's story is powerful. And when I can take folks that have been doing transactional purchasing for 20 years, and I can harness them with passion and purpose about things like human rights or the environment, there is a new attitude that emerges out of them that I find to be absolutely astounding. Too often people come to work and they do their job and they go home. Their passion is at home with their family, but when you can bring in some passion and purpose, they become different individuals. And as leaders, when I'm able to do that, I count that as a great success.
And the dinner table at home becomes much more interesting too.
Absolutely. Guess
they
what
actually
I did
care.
Today? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just and it just makes for so much just a better work experience for people.
Well, there's a reason why NASA always rates at the top in the Federal Employee Viewpoint Surveys, because it's such a cool, clear, interesting mission.
Great point.
Right?
Yeah.
And I met a young contracting officer that worked on buying an aircraft carrier. And it was very cool, right? And you know, something unique. And then when he saw it come to fruition,
how cool!
It was, you know, he was there when it went into the water. So
awesome, purpose and passion. So as our final question, you've got some tremendously capable folks here at SPLC. How will you be using these folks and this organization? How have you? How can SPLC move this purpose and this passion around sustainability and procurement forward for you? How can they help you and your organizations?
I think for me and for us is, you know, learning from other organizations and other people who are implementing things that are successful, and even learning things that didn't work, so that, you know, you can now take that to your organization and shift it in a way that it does. But, you know, more importantly is just continue to share the stories, right? Because for me and my organization, it's easier for me to go out on the road and talk about what we've done, but also to say, and by the way, there are some top, you know, companies out there that are doing things like XYZ. And if you want to connect with them, we're happy to do that. I think for us, that is a valuable asset to tap into.
Great point. Any other thoughts? Please.
I was having an earlier conversation with someone here about getting your assistance around category management. So helping me understand which categories are sort of better suited for some of these sustainability or green efforts generally, and drawing on their expertise to help us think through what are the areas we should be doing a deeper dive in, what are the best practices in this category, and certainly anything I can do to help educate folks on what category management means in the federal space. So.
Great, thank you. Jim?
Just the guidance document that came out recently is really a breakthrough for us. I mean, we've got a really terrific engineering team who knows this stuff really well. They're part of the technical advisory committee, right? But beyond them, getting it to the next level of managers to help them understand that. And then even outside my organization, because I'm a member of the 50 states, right, the National Association of State Purchasing Officials. If we really want to move this forward, we need to collaborate together and start benchmarking with each other. We need to start exploring ratings with each other within our category. Well, there's no framework to do that until now. Now there's a framework, and so that's for us the kind of next big step.
Great point.
I think I'm with Eliseo on the value of SPLC, and last year's event was my first one, and this year, last year I got several small things out of it. Who here works on chemicals and furniture? Somebody? Okay. I see a couple of people. Like, I didn't know anything about that until I went to the event last year, and we went back to Office Depot, who is our office product supply company, and they provide us with all of our furniture, and we said, hey, why don't you guys just get rid of all of our furniture that doesn't have, or that has toxic chemicals? And they're like, oh, okay. and it was really exciting.
Yeah.
So there are these small things that you can do. And then there are things like the impact sourcing thing last night. That was inspiring.
That was neat.
And some of the questions in the audience were inspiring even. So, and I didn't stand up and ask a question, even though you were asking for procurement people, because I'm embarrassed that we aren't doing it, right? So seeing that and seeing what's possible, that was in my notebook, must add impact sourcing to agenda. We're going to do it. So the people who were up here last night, you'll be getting a call from us soon. It's very cool.
Thanks so much to our panel. Appreciate all of you taking time out of your busy schedules. Appreciate it. Give it up. Give it up.
Good job, guys.
Nice to meet you, Tim.
Pleasure meeting you.
Lucille, nice to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you.